Hello, welcome everybody to the Suidlanders Media YouTube channel. We've got a couple of other channels on other sites as well, but mainly doing here. And we are our Thursday program with myself, Marius Greyling, and Simon Roche, the weekly events program where we go through the week's events and we pick out one or two of the most serious ones that we think you guys will like to hear about. And then we discuss it a bit. Hi, Simon. How are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thanks, Marius. I'm well, thanks.
Good. Off the air, me and you discussed a couple of things, but I think there's the first one is the most important one, like you rightly told me off air, about South Africa sanctions, what the USA is planning, and so forth. So, yeah, take it away for us, please, Simon.
Well, the background to the story is that South Africa has been working on the USA's last nerve for quite some time. The United States of America believes that South Africa is beholden to it, firstly because the USA is the USA, and secondly because the USA gave the ANC a lot of support just about the time of the transition from apartheid to multiracial democracy. It was very much a latecomer in supporting the African National Congress. Traditionally, the African National Congress had been supported by the Soviet Union, but when it became apparent that the apartheid system couldn't hold out for too much longer, and there was a tremendous uh, grassroots support for bringing down apartheid in the USA at the universities and in the government and so on. The USA hopped on that bandwagon and they've been exploiting it ever since. So much so that 2 years ago, when South Africa hosted the BRICS summit meeting, that is to say, the BRICS meeting of the apex of the hierarchy, the presidents,
Yeah.
the USA, in the form of Victoria Newland, came to South Africa, Deputy Undersecretary of State or whatever her title was, but very influential, terrible human being, generally perceived to be. And she bullied our president so severely that he had to tell the American president that he couldn't come to South Africa. Now, given that Russia founded BRICS, there's a general perception that it happened kind of by magic. Four countries all at the same time wanted the same thing. It was not the case. It was instigated by Russia. It's a Vladimir Putin project. It was the gravest of all diplomatic insults. So that point is merely to illustrate how much sway the USA has over South Africa. And we all know how much sway Israel has over the USA. We know the story of all of the congressmen, that's 535 people, having an APAC guy, America Israel Public Affairs Committee. So you can't get elected to public office, senior public office in the USA without the approval of the Zionist forces in the USA, who are in turn beholden to Israel. They're always looking out for Israel's best interests. So when last year South Africa was persuaded with a great deal of money into the bargain by Iran to take a case, excuse me, against Israel, a case of genocide in Gaza, to the International Criminal Tribunal, International Courts of Justice, I beg your pardon, in The Hague, in Holland. Jews in South Africa were furious. The USA was furious. Israel was furious. Alongside that, Donald Trump has had a convenient, how can I say this? I'm thinking of something like a whip to do with farm murders and so on. In other words, he has had a legitimate platform to tackle South Africa in terms of South African governance and crime and white people being killed on farms and so on. So he's had this kind of two-pronged attack
Yeah.
option, and now it's getting quite serious. It's reached the point where the USA, we are hearing from good sources, is presently contemplating cutting South Africa off of the SWIFT international financial transfer notification system. What it is it runs in parallel to financial transactions. The banks process the money. SWIFT processes the communication, the notification, if you like.
Yeah.
It's not, it doesn't make the financial transfer. It notifies the parties. And the reason why that is so important is because in the modern global economy, you have to know immediately where you stand financially regarding transactions. It's not like 100 years ago where you just had to live with the fact that a bank might send a telegraph to your local bank, who would then, bring you a note with a bank's. There's a word for it. A messenger boy.
Yeah.
So if you imagine London or somewhere, the bank received £100,000 from wherever, New York, and the little boy dashes down the street and gives you notification of this very serious financial transfer. Or you would get a telegram at your club, your gentleman's club. Obviously, at that time, it wasn't ever ordinary people or small businesses who were receiving international financial transfers.
Yeah.
It's a bit like flying in airplanes. Young people, my son's age, don't understand that in my day, nobody flew on an airplane unless they were super duper wealthy, or they were being sent abroad or to Cape Town or Johannesburg, wherever, for business. So it was for businessmen and very wealthy people. Now everybody flies and you can get cheap tickets to anywhere. Likewise, now in the modern world of financial transactions between you, Marius,
Yeah.
and a place in China that is selling you a pair of running shoes, everybody's doing it.
Mm.
With the result that it has to be very efficient and effective, and you've got to know you cannot compete in the world. If you're the one company or country, whatever the case may be, bank that is in a marketplace of companies or in a marketplace of banks or in a marketplace, namely the global village of countries, that's doing it as it was being done 100 years ago or 50 or whatever the case may be. So it's SWIFT is not what people think it is. And generally, I was guilty of this. When you find out what it really is, you think, can it be that important?
Mm.
And then with a little bit of research, you realize, oh, yeah, no, that makes sense. You can't be, let's reduce this to the level of companies just to make it perhaps more easily comprehensible for everybody. Let's say that there are 30 companies in a country that provide an IT service, some kind of IT programming, and one of them does all of its transactions with cash and checks.
Mm.
Clearly, it's got one hand tied behind its back as far as competing with the others is concerned, and sooner or later it'll go out of business. And in the same way, you have to be as quick and as nimble as all of the other countries in the world when it comes to international trade. Otherwise, you will be snookered. So this is a very, very serious thing. If South Africa is cut off the SWIFT system, we will be in very, very big trouble. It will hamper I want to say, even paralyze our banks. And one thing that people forget about, just speaking about the banks for a second, South African banks, is that they come out of the European tradition. In other words, we have a famous bank called Nedbank, Nederlandse Bank,
Yeah.
Netherlands Bank. And the Netherlands Bank has been a client of banks in Holland for 150 years, or whatever the correct figure is, 175, 123. When our banks need money for big projects, all banks do this, by the way. There's no mine in South Africa that is financed by one bank. When you talk about $10 billion of financing, nobody will take all of that risk by themselves. It's just not the done thing. So you split it up between the smaller banks in South Africa, and then big international banks also get a chunk of the thing. So you could say that your Ford F-250 truck, the debt on it that you owe to a local motor finance house ripples all the way back to one of the big banks of South Africa, and then it ripples back to Europe. We are very much a client of European banking. So there are all sorts of consequential effects that people are contemplating here. It's a bit like the Y2K problem when, for those who are too young to remember, in 1999 or 1998 it began. I know this because our school was one of the few in our area to have computer studies. It wasn't an official subject, but we had computer studies. And so I learned a little bit about computer programming. Never went anywhere with it. I'm not a boffin, but the first computers of the, let's say, the late 70s and 80s, ZX Spectrum and Commodore VIC-64 and so on, when you started them up, you would get the date, but there were only 2 digits allocated for it. So you could be in the year 1978, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, up to 1999. And there was no understanding, allegedly, in those computers for 2 zeros to mean 2,000, 3,000, 6,000, 9,000. So the computer wouldn't be able to just kick from 1999 to 00. And, well, that means 2,000. So the industry put out a warning that all computers in the world might fail. There's no way of knowing for sure. And some people, I know one guy who's never worked since. He was in his 20s. He offered a service updating people's computers, putting in a special software just to make sure that the computer wouldn't, because it didn't have a date reference, wouldn't just crash at the stroke of midnight to the year 2000. So my point is that these progressive business developments they're vital, they're integral to everything that is around us. And we don't always recognize how deep they lie. It turned out that the Y2K, year 2000, problem was absolute rubbish, complete nonsense, absolute lie. The computers could count in zeros. So it was the 21st of, I beg your pardon, the 1st of January, the year 00. The computer was indifferent to the fact that that was the year that Adam was born. It didn't have an impact on the computer's function. So these things are vitally important, and if they cut us off, we're going to be in a world of trouble. And people, as I say, are speculating. How bad is this really? Is it going to be the end, or will we be able to muddle on, using, I don't know, cash payments or something, or waiting in the spirit of trust for money to be paid before sending to Europe, as we famously do, some of the world's finest citrus, in the fanciest shops in Europe. South Africa's citrus is very, very much featured. So that's the whole story. I've gone into a whole lot of detail because I doubt that many people listening to this, as just with many people in the world, actually understand what is the SWIFT system.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to talk about how did Russia handle it, if there's some comparison, or we can just move on.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm glad you did it the way you did it because I didn't exactly understand the SWIFT thing with the money and the banking. How does it form a integral part of the economic system? But now I do. Now I understand completely. And let's say South Africa gets cut off from it, and I wanna service. Somebody needs to come fix my computer. But he said I must pay him, and then he'll come and do it. So
It's
he's
for
gonna.
international transfers. So if you
Oh,
paid a local South African, he might say, "Oh, I'm not," as you say, Marius,
yeah.
"I'm not lifting a finger, that blimming Marius. I don't trust him at all. When I see the money in my account, that's when I'll start the engine of my car."
Yes.
If you've put in, if you've got your electronic financial transfer account to notify his cellular telephone, and if his bank notifications are on, then he's going to get notices, number one, that you've made the payment, and number two, that he's received the payment, assuming that you've paid the extra $5 for immediate payment, where
Yeah.
it happens in the very moment. The problem is international trade.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the banks don't talk to each other in the same way. And So, in other words, First National Bank, my bank, doesn't have an immediate notification system with a Russian bank, for instance, or an American bank. There probably is something, but it's not an option, apparently. They
Hmm.
probably know what's cooking, but there isn't a public service. So, yeah, if you were in fact ordering a pair of running shoes from China, and they then have to wait for 2 weeks for the money to pass through the two, from your bank to the South African Reserve Bank, to the Chinese Reserve Bank, to the Chinese bank,
Mm.
for a secretary in that Chinese running shoe factory to say, "Oh, there's been a 10 or $100 payment made." But golly gee, I've got no idea who made it. It would be chaos,
Yeah.
absolute chaos. It would be a disaster. You'd be using reference numbers and all sorts of things like that, which is a clumsy system. They would give you a reference number. You would make the payment using the reference number. You get one digit wrong, and it's just absolutely shambolic.
Yeah.
So the SWIFT system is very, very important.
Uh,
We will be in a world of grief, Marius, if they do that to us.
Yeah. Simon, I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to make it broader? Like, what did Russia say about it? Or do you want to move on to what the Israelis did on Monday, Tuesday?
I'll be very brief. The
Okay.
obvious question is, how did Russia survive? Why does Simon, this silly Russian fanboy, keep on talking about how on his recent trip the Russian economy is doing so? You can just see it. Why is he saying they're doing well if they can't trade with the world? But he says it's going to be bad for South Africa because the Russians had two huge allies. Number one, China made it clear from the very beginning, we're going to be with you all the way. Number two, the Europeans, when Russia was sanctioned, said to the Americans, this will be the death of us if we can't get Russian gas and oil. So the Americans said, well, we'll help you a bit there. They sent a delegation to India secretly, since been leaked, and persuaded the Indians to buy enormous amounts of Russian gas and oil and then to resell it to Europe. So it's a big charade, it's a
Yeah.
big pretense. There are other things that the Russians did. For instance, within BRICS, they have been the driving force behind 7 payment systems or payment notification systems to replace their being cut off from SWIFT and Visa and MasterCard. This is actually a very huge subject. It
Mm.
involves much more than just SWIFT. And so they got through it. China kept on buying trillions of billions of dollars of Russian gas and oil. And then India removed itself from some of its traditional suppliers and established new links with Russia, but at much greater volumes, because now India is suddenly the supplier to Europe.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's part of the Russian trick. But onto the Israeli thing. Yeah. Oh dear, Marius, I can't bear the subject any longer. As you know, devote myself to consuming social media from about 4 in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, and I delve into every subject imaginable. But the Gaza thing, I just can't bear it anymore. I'm no Muslim, but you're striking hospitals, striking journalists at a hospital. Then, when other journalists arrive to cover the massacre, they strike them. Then 2 days later, they say, "Oops, sorry, didn't mean to." But in under different circumstances or in a different mood, the Israelis will brag to you that they have the world's most accurate weaponry.
Mm.
You know, the Israel story, I don't care. If you're a Christian Zionist, fine. I understand why. No problem. I'm not going to fight with you. But I'm saying it's revolting what they're doing. The
Yeah.
fact that they are Israel, if you're a Christian Zionist, so if you say Israel is the chosen folk, it is not an identity that was stolen or supplanted by the Khazarian people 1100 years ago. They're the same people, they're the chosen people of God, therefore they can do whatever they like. And this is the equivalent of I can only think of the word in Afrikaans, where God said to the Jews, go in and slaughter the animals and slaughter the young children and slaughter the women and slaughter the elderly and burn the crops. There's a very tidy word for it in Afrikaans. I can't think of the word in English. Yeah, maybe it is that. Maybe it's that. And in the heavens, the entire Gaza endeavor is a noble act of godliness. But I'm just so sick of the revolting cruelty with which it's being carried out. That vote after the soldiers raped the Palestinian men, and there was a global outrage about it. The Israelis held a poll. A television company did it. Do you disapprove of our soldiers mass raping, sodomizing Palestinian inmates, or are you indifferent? Or I can't remember the other word. It wasn't, do you approve of it? It was, is it acceptable to you or tolerable or what have you? 67% of the country said it's A-OK, it's fine.
Sure.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
And on top of that, I know that this is a weekly news program, Marius, and we shouldn't delve into esoteric things. But the reality is that I've been telling everybody for 2 long years that it is written in black and white that in this particular year, if Israel wishes to ensure the coming of the Messiah, then certain things have to be done.
Mm.
And one of those things is to extirpate. That's the strongest word in English for destroy. To extirpate. Destroy to the point of leaving no trace of Gaza. And there's a whole occultic reason for it that I could talk about at length. Perhaps on another occasion I shall do so. It harks back to Samson and the Gazans. It is believed by the rabbis to be a very, very deep and mysterious allegorical message in the story of Samson and the Gazans, and that they're meant to learn from that
Yeah.
in order to ensure the coming of the Messiah. But I'm just sick of it, man. It can't, geez, no, heavens above. Did you know, Marius, that a bunch of Israeli doctors tried to air the following grievance? It didn't get very far, as you can imagine. But they worked out that the Israeli soldiers were using Palestinian children as target practice. And how they worked that out is that they began noticing patterns of injuries. So on a Tuesday, let's say over the span of 3 months, there would be 10 particular days on which an inordinate number of children were victims. Okay, these things happen. Sometimes more children, sometimes they're less. Then they began noticing that when on those days there was an unusually high number of children, the injuries were all in the same bodily region. So on day number 1, there would be, let's say, across the hospitals in Gaza, 100 children would be brought in with single bullet wounds to the head. On day, we're talking about over 3 months. Obviously, not every day is kind of a Gaza-wide target practice day. On day number 2, we call it 10 days later, there would be 100 children killed or severely wounded, all with wounds to the left leg. And so it would go. Middle of the chest, belly, right arm. And the final day that this took place, in other words, it happened, and then in the next over the next few days, one doctor spoke of it, and then so many more did, and news channels started reporting it, so they put an end to it. But on the final day, it was genitalia.
What? Wow.
They're sick. But if you tell people that if you read about this, you can go and read about it, except nobody does. Nobody will. Not readings written by me or Muslims or Buddhists or Jains from India, those Indians that wear only white garments, and wherever they walk, they take a very, very fine, delicate broom with them to sweep the path in front of them so that they don't kill even a microscopic ant. The very, you're not allowed to kill anything, any living creature. It's in Jewish law, by law, Lore, so the myths and legends and the laws and the advices, not the 10 Commandments. It is in Jewish law that you can discover how deeply satanic this is. By their words, our boss was with me this morning, and I was telling him about, what was the anecdote? Oh, I was telling him about how Karl Marx wrote extensively about how communism is not about atheism. When he says that religion is the opiate of the masses, in other words, it's like opium, his point was that Christianity is bad. And he writes in the fourth critique of Hegel how it is imperative to destroy the Christian God, Christian alone. And he talks about how, because the European family is the manifestation of God on earth in the form of Father, Holy Spirit, so the mommy, and then the children are an articulation of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. This is a pedophiliac satanic death cult cabal. And anybody who says, oh, Simon doesn't know what he's talking about, I know then that that person hasn't read about it.
Yeah.
Because every single person I know who's made an effort to read their writings, their lore about this, knows that it is a pedophiliac satanic death cult cabal. That's what we're seeing play out here. We are seeing play out the summoning of the abomination of desolation that will sit in the temple.
Yeah. Simon, thanks once again. I see our time is nearly done. Thanks for explaining the SWIFT thing. I wasn't completely clear about it. I know it would have grave implications for our country if they did say we are cut off of SWIFT. And then, just a mention again of what Israel has been up to and the complete lies around their attacks, bombing the same place twice, half an hour out of each other's time span, and saying a couple of hours later, but we love journalists. That was accident, but we just bombed them twice. But anyway, we're not gonna. I can also just rant about it if I want to. But Simon, thanks, and then we'll do this next week again.
Yeah, look forward to seeing you next week, Tuesday. And to all of our regular viewers, I apologize that we weren't able to do an international interview yesterday, Wednesday. It was just a catastrophic day altogether. I was hosting a group of German journalists, and their timing didn't work out very well. They ended up running a day late, and so I was stuck on top of the mountains. It was absolute shambles, very, very sadly, because we tried hard to set it up quite nicely, but sometimes it does happen that way. Anyway, next Wednesday, we will have an interview with another foreign personality.
Yeah. Great, Simon. Have a great evening. Cheers, man.
Same to you, Marius. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.